We have opinions, we've done reviews, we've broken down the rules you might miss, done gameplays of both. We've highlighted the expansions and let you know what you might want to consider when deciding which one is your favorite. And now it's time for a video that's all debate and all opinion. Entirely.
Oh yeah.
I like Dune Uprising more than Dune Imperium.
And I'm the complete opposite.
So let's talk about it. Let's engage in a friendly debate around what I think we both will set the floor of the conversation at: two remarkable games.
These are both amazing games.
It's like we're debating a 9.2 and a 9.3. I mean, they're, well, I mean, it might actually be more significant, but we're debating games that are very, very solid to begin with. You're going to win no matter what you play. It just comes down at this point to preference and why we like certain things over others. So Corey, I'm going to open the floor to you, and I'm going to spend most of the time, I think, reacting to your opinions and engaging in the conversation, because the audience knows I'm going to interrupt enough as it is. I don't need to have my own points to get my own thoughts in.
It's almost like this is your YouTube channel or something like that. Isn't that crazy?
Guys on Reddit don't think so.
Hey.
Guys on Reddit don't. Every time I have a guest, I just assume that the people on BGG are going like, please let like anyone but him. Anyone but the duck. No, he's not handing the channel over? All right, well.
I don't read the comments, so, well, at least on Reddit.
No, my comments are great.
The comments on the videos are great.
It's just people with miserable.
That one guy.
It's just people with miserable lives are terrible.
There's that one guy who always comments on your videos that I really enjoy. That might be me.
Yeah, might be. Okay, opinions.
Yeah.
Why do you like Dune Imperium more than Dune Uprising?
So, as I probably thoroughly annoyed Boots with last night, I really enjoy the books. I'm currently about, as of the recording of this video, about 200 pages into Chapter House Dune, which is the 6th book. And for me personally, having played multiple times between the original and Uprising, the one that I feel is more accurately depicting and like kind of, you know, making me feel more engaged with the book, the universe found in the book, has got to be this one. I mean, you know, the idea of having, you know, so many things happening in the background where the combat is important, but it's not necessarily everything. And so many factions in the book, the Bene Gesserit, the House Harkonnen, House Atreides, trying to do things background, you know, where if I do this, then I can do this, and then this person will do that, and that kind of planning.
The political subterfuge, the wheeling and dealing you feel like is maybe emphasized more in base game. Would you then agree that Uprising is facilitated towards a more movie-based audience? If people haven't read the books and don't intend to read the books.
And I'm not saying that it necessarily
the movies,
required. But
especially the second half of the recent Dune, iteration, certainly celebrate the military conquests. They highlight, they make them beautiful. They celebrate the journey with the sandworms. And so Uprising might fit a more current day cultural understanding of Dune as opposed to a historical and lore and fiction and fan-based appreciation.
And especially Uprising is the one that introduces having sandworms into the game, which is a point for your side as well, as far as, you know, even being attributed to the book.
Yeah.
You know, because those are there. And I mean, to be fair, the base Dune Imperium game also happens to have a lot of the elements from the first movie itself. It's not just entirely in the book, and you're not by any stretch of the imagination required to read the book in order to play this game. But for me, as I kept reading the books and then coming back and playing this game, I felt so much more immersed in the base versus Uprising, which
talk me through that. What in Uprising doesn't match when it comes to the lore and the story that's being told in the books, whereas base game Imperium seems to.
So like the spy mechanic, for example. While the spy mechanic is fantastic and I love it, the idea, I mean, you do have a couple of characters that kind of act like spies. One in particular that I can think of, and I won't spoil the book, even though it's been out for many years. But the whole, like, I can spy on this faction or I can spy on that faction, that doesn't really happen in the book.
Information is a lot more restricted, and loyalty is loyalty in the book, unless an entire side is switching, right? Like unless betrayal is happening either on a national level or not at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the key examples. Also, as much as I enjoy the sandworm mechanic, I don't think it stays true really to what the purpose of the sandworms were.
Just add 3 to every battle. What are you talking about? And have them on different sides of the warring factions.
Yeah, and I mean, the sandworms themselves did not actually attack enemies.
They just broke stuff.
They broke stuff and were used as troop transports, which amazing visual scene, by the way.
Interesting.
Amazing visual scene, being able, even in the controversial opinion, I actually enjoyed the 1984 version of Dune. Just because it's campy and cheesy and it's wonderful, but the writing the sandworm scene was kind of cool from that movie, I will say.
So I understand your stance when it comes to the lore and what you experience on the game, but let's set lore to the side. Let's set the framework and the history and the experience that you bring with you to the table, and look at the mechanics of the game and look at the actual game that we're playing.
Sure.
Uprising for me is a much deeper, much more rewarding, and much more long-lasting game in my collection than base game Imperium is. I remember when I first played base game Imperium, we were comparing it to other worker placement deck building games, and for the record, deck building is, if I join it with drafting, which I think they're very similar, is like my favorite mechanic in a game, period. I love a system that lets me add things to my hand until I feel like I've broken the game, and then the game ends and someone wins and they have an amazing turn, and then you reset and you start from zero and you do it again. I love the build. I love the progression. And base game Dune Imperium didn't do that for me. It didn't focus on combat much, but it also didn't focus on deck building much. And the board places are fairly open. They're fairly bland. They don't give me a lot of growth throughout the course of the game when comparing it to things like, at the time, Lost Ruins of Arnak or Endless Winter. And so I actually didn't. It was my least favorite of the collection of this genre originally, until I started playing expansions. And now that I have Uprising, I don't know that I could do without the enhanced locations, the spies that give you manipulation over later actions in the game, the emphasis on combat and the reformulation of the deck, or the ability to just combine decks and craft your own. All of that creates such a richer and deeper environment when it comes to the actual board game I'm playing.
Yeah, see, one of the things that I'll disagree with you on, though, is you're saying about Dune Imperium base game, as far as deck building is concerned. For me, I loved the deck building aspect. I thought that with the original game, deck building was more highly emphasized. Now, that could be argued to the detriment of combat, which definitely is the main complaint that I've heard from people about, especially my oldest. His main complaint with Dune Imperium was he loves combat, and the base Dune Imperium just didn't give enough combat-wise. But having said that, I feel especially that the deck building aspect from the original, and especially if you add, especially the Rise of Ix expansion, which I'll get into more later, like, that deck building experience is so satisfying, and the combos that you can get off of those cards.
So I mean, let's talk about this though, because the reformulation here in the deck for Dune Imperium Uprising has lower cost cards with more powerful abilities, and then some very high cost, very high punchy cards. It's a more rewarding buy and draw more cards type of structure, whereas base game Dune, original game Dune, has a more expensive deck. It's a harder threshold to cross, and I would argue requires or is greatly improved by the wipe system that's not introduced until Immortality comes in.
Yep,
and so the clear the row should have been in the base game, but it wasn't. And so when I first experienced the base game, I found myself struggling to get cards not rewarded by having a lot of them.
Yeah, to be fair, they did not include that in Uprising, that clear.
They didn't, we theorize that they might have restructured the deck and kept that in mind, but I don't know. Maybe they just don't like wipe abilities in general.
But I also think, as far as the cards from the base is considered, you have also that varying progression of higher cost cards.
There is
a middle ground on there. It's not, like looking down here, we've got 2s and 3s and a 4. I feel like with the original, you're going to be having also 5, 6 more 5s and 6s and 7s as well, so that later on, if you're able to have those rounds where you can get those higher, persuasion cards, those can be a massive benefit.
Yeah, I do think that if you get into those higher cost, those higher influence or buy power rounds in Dune Uprising, you end up either buying a Spice Must Flow, because you need it for victory points, because victory points can score much higher, which we'll touch on in just a moment, I'm sure. Or I'll actually buy multiple cards of a similar faction. I think the cohesion in factions here is also a very compelling thing. They've structured these to reward close-knit and tactical play, whereas base game, I felt like you went for whatever was the best card because it was the best card on the table that you could afford, not necessarily going for things that'll synergize together.
See, I would disagree with that, and that may just be a product of my gameplay. I have no problem with looking at a set of cards and saying, I don't care if I have 5, persuasion right now. I don't want any of these cards. And I'm okay with skipping around, because if I don't feel that there's a card out there that synergizes appropriately with my deck, I'm trying to have, 12 cards, maybe 13 cards maximum, and I want them to all synergize with each other so that when I keep drawing cards, I'm going to get more and more powerful bonuses and make sure that I can get those every single round. I think there's a greater emphasis on the actual deck building rather than just swingy combat.
I think the last point I'm going to make here, and then if you have any rebuttal to this, I'll let you move on with the topic, because we're touching on the deck quite a bit. But I think it's something that's very important to me and really did influence how I've experienced both games. In base game, one, I find it very dissatisfying to not spend the money that I've collected. If I have a round where I have 5 or 6 buy power, I really hate not using it, and I'm very disappointed when a game puts me in a position where I can't use it.
That's fair.
And so, that's just maybe a feel bad moment for me that doesn't impact you as much. However, I also really like deck building games that allow me to do weird things with the deck. For instance, going on a call strategy where you whittle your hand down to where you have almost nothing left. Well, base game, I did that. I tried. And I ended up with like 4 cards and nothing left. Like I ended up with 4 cards is too few, but I think I ended up with like 6 or 7 cards. And every round, because of the draw power that I had in my deck, I was drawing all of my cards and could not draw to my threshold.
Yeah.
And I found that really disappointing as well, because it was hard enough to add cards to my deck that a call strategy wasn't a rewarding way to play the game for me, a really hard, heavy call strategy. Whereas here, I can fill my hand with so many cards so quickly that I can get rid of all my base cards and I have a whole new set to play with by mid-game. And that's rewarding. That's nice when I've thrown out everything I started with except for maybe 1 or 2. Keep the signet ring. Everything else, get out of here.
I hear that. And that is a fair point.
All right.
I'll still disagree with you. The other thing that I dislike, not dislike, I mean, I love both of these games.
Yeah, we set the foundation. They're both excellent. We'd be happy to play them at any point, at any time.
One of the things that irks me, however,
that's terrible about this game.
It's terrible about this game.
You got to get the thumbnail,
Yeah, it's true.
Why Corey hates.
Everybody hates. But what I intensely...
Everybody hates.
Everybody hates. The one thing that I can't really gel with Uprising is the heavy emphasis on combat. Now, as I mentioned before, base Dune Imperium, to its detriment, maybe underemphasized.
For sure it does.
The combat.
For sure it does. It's you think combat should be more fun than it is.
Yeah. But I think when trying to rebalance it for the purposes of Uprising, I think they went too far with it. I think there's too much of an emphasis on I need to win multiple combats in order for me to have any shot of winning this game.
But the changes they made also greatly improved the experience. I understand the argument that they went too far. I get that. However, the changes they made in terms of restructuring how our combat deck works, so second and third place have compelling things you might want to win more than first place position, having paired objectives that allow you to decide when you're going to go all in a battle and score victory points based off of matching different combat victories, having the resource demanding extra victory points on the card, and the duplicating effect of the sandworms, which I understand might be a broken strategy if left to your own devices, but is certainly fun and impactful when you can do it, and when you can take advantage of it when you've done it. I get they might have taken it a little bit too far, but I think they've done less of a wrong thing by overemphasizing combat than Dune, original did by underemphasizing it.
Well, to that point, what I'll say though is that a lot in Dune Imperium base is, well, if everybody's fighting in combat, I'm going to be the guy kind of behind the scenes, and I can work a way to get up the different tracks, and I can get Spice Must Flow, and I can kind of work my way almost around combat and maybe sneak in and go to Highliner and get a whole bunch of stuff for that one moment where I just need those 2 more points to just end this game right now. And that kind of thing where I can be in the background is very rewarding, because then when it happens and you send a ton of people in and everybody goes, oh, wait a second, this guy's about to win the game right now and we didn't notice, we weren't paying attention. That to me is a very rewarding thing. Or on the flip side of that is just, oh, wait a second, I completely missed that. But it's also enjoyable in its own way. And I think if you have too heavy of an emphasis on the combat, then it doesn't matter what I'm doing around the board. If I don't interact at all with the combat, I'm at a severe disadvantage.
You certainly could be. I think you can't ignore combat, especially if multiple players are ignoring combat. You're in trouble. But I will say that because of the opportunity to score victory points from a number of different access points, whether it's buying, tech tiles, whether it's getting victory points by winning combat, whether it's going to intrigue cards that have hidden victory points. You could have multiple of those in your hand, whether it's buying cards from the row that allow you to sell spice, get rid of Solari, trash cards, whatever it is to unlock. I oftentimes find Uprising to be much more swingy than base game Imperium ever was. And
yes,
originally, I didn't like that. But as I've played it more and grown to understand where that swinginess comes from, I find that it's a controllable level of variance that makes me enjoy the puzzle that I'm trying to solve more than base game does. Base game, I know that if you hit 10, I'm probably not crossing the threshold and getting to 11 or getting to 12. But with a little bit more depth and understanding of the puzzle that's in front of me with Uprising, I actually sit back and say, well, I don't have to win. I can win one combat and one combat well, or not even win, but just prevent someone else from scoring it. I could tie someone on a combat and be satisfied because I have 4 victory points on my board that they don't know anything about, or I have that card that I'm going to be drawing up in the next round or two, and I'm set up and ready to cash it in for a victory point that no one's expecting. I like those moments of endgame scoring and pops. I like the fact that I've seen games run all the way up to the 15, 16 point threshold, and everyone almost across the board when I play Uprising is above 10. Everyone's pushing above that line. Whereas I have seen people in base game Imperium hit 4 and hit 5 and not be in the game anymore. By mid-game, they're just out of it because someone's going to hit 10 and they're not going to be able to catch up. I think you can always catch up in Uprising, and I think that matters.
So I understand that point. But I will disagree where I feel personally that the swinginess of the game, how much it can swing, I think to me is a detriment in this game, where base Dune Imperium, where every decision, especially if you're including some of the expansions, again, more on that later, like I've had games where every single decision felt so important that, especially in the later game, where that game of if I do this, but he does that, and then I do this, and that kind of chess match between the multiple players that you have at the table, that kind of interaction where every decision makes so much of a difference, especially in a tight game, that swinginess almost kind of ruins it at the end, where it's like, okay, so I lost by 3 points. What did all those decisions?
Where'd they all come
matter?
from? Wait a minute. I played really well. I think it comes down to the type of players that you have around the table. I'm not a very AP prone player unless I feel pressure from the game and players around the game to need me to slow down. I like leaning into chaos. I like seeing how things play out. I'm the type of player that says, hey, my objective for this game is to use a little thumper to multiply all of the resource on the third area of Spice collection.
If memory serves, actually, there is a thumper card in the base game as well.
I'm just saying, I'm the type of player that from the beginning will say, well, this looks interesting. Can I win the game by doing this? Like, for instance, as we've started exploring and I've been doing research on how swingy the worms really are, almost every game I play now, I think to myself, well, let's win without worms. It doesn't happen much.
It doesn't happen much, and that's part of the problem.
However, well, that's why I can say I think it's a problem. Yeah. But I like that play. I like that play style. Where base game is much more like a chess match. You're right about that. I'm not much of a chess player because I always know there's a better action that I could take. It's not so fun to memorize those actions for me. I mean, then you're just going up against, ADHD and dyslexia against whatever it is that you have. And I'm assuming you have at least one neurological condition, but that actually might be in favor of memorization and analytics as opposed to directly oppositional. I'm rewarded by chaos. I function well in chaos, and this game gives me that.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I myself align myself as chaotic neutral. I don't care what it is that's burning to the ground as long as something is burning to the ground.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Hey, we'll agree there.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
No, but I mean, I think that can be somewhat mitigated though by having the different leaders, and especially if you get to some of the higher, the leaders that have kind of rated from higher difficulty. I think when you get to those, then you end up having some of that variance where you need to pay more attention kind of to how you're drawing the deck, how you're manipulating the board.
Sure.
Or if you want more of a chaotic one, you go for something maybe less complicated and you're just like, whatever, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
I think you can do that especially with the base, especially when you're adding, because I think the base ends up having more of those higher complicated more intricate kind of leaders versus Uprising, which only has a few of them.
Uprising did scale back on complexity of leaders for or in favor of complexity on the board. And it's one of the things that I like less about it. However, if you're going to own it all, you just, mix them together. A lot of them cross over. I had people complaining about the video that I did earlier, about a week ago or so, where I said, don't buy both. And I had one guy in the comment section with 13 thumbs up. It's like, I don't understand this video. Why are you to tell people not to buy both? No one goes out and buys both of them. I go out and buy both of them.
I bought both of them.
What are you talking about? We all own all of them. I'm just saying you should know what you're getting so that you experience the best way possible, and then you'll buy the other one 6 months later. Of course we all own both. Yeah. It's good marketing.
My youngest actually mentioned that to me today. Was that
Dad?
Daddy, your friend actually said you don't need to buy both. I'm like, yeah, I already have them both.
Yeah. I'm making the video because we've all bought them both. I'm telling the new people.
And I have no regrets about buying them. This is a fantastic game as well.
Of course, yeah. But I will say that I don't get base game or base game components to the table as much that I own Uprising, and understanding that I like this one more means that this one plus expansions is probably enough for a long time.
Yeah, but if we're talking about expansions, though...
Let's get to it. Because you have to share. I understand. 2 of them came earlier. We've played Bloodlines enough to be able to talk about it now. I get what you're going to say. The 2 that came out originally, what I would argue, fixing Dune Imperium, are shared expansions that can come here to Uprising as well. Why do you think those expansions stand better by your favorite version?
Well, I mean, I agree with you that you can. I mean, the rules do specify how you can actually implement, and especially Rise of X, which is arguably my favorite expansion of any game I've ever played.
Whoa.
Yeah, I would rank it higher than Prelude for Terraforming
I gotta
Mars.
pause. Why? We're gonna be doing a whole review. We're not gonna get too deep into it here, but ever played?
Ever played for any game, because there's so many times Prelude
Because
being
it so fixes your game.
No, it's not. It's not even that. I mean, I remember I rated base Dune Imperium as a 9 on Board Game Geek.
Base.
Yeah.
I think I had it like a 7.
Again, we disagree on
Yeah,
these things.
yeah.
But I loved Dune Imperium already. And typically when an expansion comes out, there's always that feeling of, okay, like, what are you going to do that's going to be good, and what are you going to do that's going to be not as great?
Yeah.
There's always that kind of, well, this is the reason why they didn't have this in the base,
Yeah.
right?
It's like a new Will Smith movie. I've already seen your best work, sir.
Yeah.
On stage with Chris Rock.
Yep. Just remember, paper beats rock. Or whatever there was. There was a joke with that.
I just
can't
horribly
remember.
derailed you. Continue.
You did.
Why
Well
do you love the
done.
expansion?
But, you know, with Rise of X, though, I think what ends up happening is it actually adds so many things where it's like, oh, this game is now shifted dramatically to the point where it's almost a new game, even just from having an expansion with the same elements as the base, but that kind of shift just made things completely brand new.
Have you, kind of how Uprising makes it brand new, they should have released just a Dune Imperium Rise of X standalone, and you would have had 3 core games to play. I mean, really, that's almost the degree to which it seems like you're saying it transformed the game for you. So I'm not saying they should do that, but they could have.
Right.
They could have. So why doesn't X match with Uprising to the same degree of complement that you found it matched with Imperium?
So, I mean, there are the rules where you can put X with Uprising. My problem, though, is I think the meshing of Rise of X with the original, I think, is so well done, and it creates so many clever extra combos and different strategies that I want to like it when combined with Uprising, but I always feel there's something missing. I'm like, oh man, but if we had this card here in Uprising, man, that would be a good thing. And then again, you could mix those,
could do it.
but it's not the same. And then, you know, when the recent expansion, when they introduced Bloodlines, and they're like, oh, here's some tech tiles. And I mentioned this multiple times when we were playing the game where, oh, that's a cool tech tile, but I kind of miss the ones from Rise of X.
In the way I play games, all the tech tiles are just going together, and they're either being stacked here or they're being stacked there, unless they specifically have rules that are directly related to sandworms or, you know, recruiting different people that you don't have, like dreadnoughts and stuff. Like, those have to, of course, be modified, but I like just combining components.
Oh yeah, and it's certainly fun to do so, and I think we're planning at some point to try and figure out a way to do everything all at once.
Yeah,
Everything Everywhere All at Once. Fantastic movie, by the way. But now I've derailed you.
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I'm not derailed.
That's true.
I didn't like the movie very much.
Oh really? We can get into that.
Now I've derailed you.
Now you've derailed me. No, but I love the interaction with Ix and the base game. I think it enhances the deck building aspect, which I've already mentioned. To me, it feels better. I think the unload mechanic, I think, works better and synergizes more with some of the additional stuff in base. And I mean, it's to the point where when I'm teaching somebody base Dune Imperium, I'm going to include Rise of X each and every time, even if it's somebody who's brand new, because it's like, if you want to have the optimum version of this game, let's do this.
I do think Uprising doesn't need much of what the expansions introduced that I felt like, base game Dune did need. That's the crux of it for me, is I do think they're very different games. I think the experience of play is remarkably similar and yet remarkably different and distinct when you're sitting down. A chess match versus a helter-skelter, what feels like area control, combat, throw everything at the wall type of experience. And expansions enhance both of them in interesting ways and provide interesting modifiers, but the first two expansions are very much designed for the first version of the game, and they solve problems or enhance areas of the game that were lacking or weak in what would be a more introductory version of a board game, whereas I think Uprising solves those on the table itself. It adds modifiers like the sandworms as opposed to the dreadnoughts and lets you mess with stuff. And when it comes to Bloodlines, which is the first expansion that's been introduced for Uprising, I feel like it just kind of grabs elements of the other expansions and says, well, you don't need everything from the other expansion because it makes it just a little bit too messy, but we still want you to have some tech tiles, and we still think it'd be nice if there were other troops you could add to battle, so like let's introduce these little guys. And
yeah, but I don't entirely enjoy, I mean, the Sauerkraut commanders from Bloodlines are okay.
They're lacking for me.
But they're definitely...
I would take them out. I don't find them necessary. I actually find them a bit cumbersome. And I don't find the play overly rewarding. I will say that my favorite leaders, though, come in Bloodlines.
See, I will disagree with that. And maybe we'll have a video on this later where we're talking about each other's favorite leaders.
So expansions, I would give it to you in terms of how expansions pair and enhance these games. I think they both enhance both games. I think they enhance base game Dune more. Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking for the full collection and a varied experience of play across the full collection, then, you know, I think you almost set expansions off to the side, and we're back to talking just about the core experiences and what we're getting from the original boxes. While I will admit, the best expansions do fit your copy. Any other big points that you want to go over when comparing these two and being a deciding factor for you?
Not that I can think of.
Because after this, I'm going to set base game on fire, and I believe you're going to set your copy of Upright, right? As long as there's something burning, then...
I'm not saying about it. This game's fantastic. I love playing this game.
Oh, okay. We'll set both my copies on fire, and we'll make it look like you're burning one of yours. You'll cry a little bit?
I can do that. I'm very good at faking tears.
Just committed. I'm such a chaotic player, and this is where I'll sign this off and invite you all to let us know, like, what other highs and lows and elements of the game state are enhanced, reduced, changed, adapted in ways that fit and don't fit your play style. The last video I did was a direct comparison between the two of them, trying to help people who are new buyers decide where they want to enter the market, right? Because it's a great game and people should enter this game, but I think they should do so responsibly and know and get a good experience. Like you said, you always teach with Rise of Ix. Well, then if they're buying base game, you would probably encourage them to always purchase Rise of Ix right alongside of it.
Absolutely.
Right? As a core standard.
Rise of Ix is a 10 for me on Board Game Geek.
This conversation is much more centered around why certain elements fit us better. And I think the audience out there and the community out there echoes a lot of these points, and I've seen these discussions kind of across the board. I think eventually my preferred way of playing this will be a handcrafted and hand-chosen combination of cards, probably leaning towards more rather than fewer, because I do love deck building, but I don't want the deck to become so cumbersome that I'm unable to find the cards I'm searching for.
Right.
So a customized version of this deck, a base that includes, a base that is Uprising, because the base game and the spy mechanic enhances the depth of the game in a way that I just think is necessary for more advanced players. All the leaders mixed together, so you can draft from pretty much anyone available. And little sub-modules from the other two expansions included. You know, like our progression track is a nice thing to have. Like, it's fun to like whittle your way up that. The extra market to purchase is a great area to go explore that doesn't require you to be focused on other parts of the board. I might keep, this little tech system here instead of having the full board where you're building engine, but I'll bring the tiles over. I think a hybrid will be where I prefer this game, and I don't think that's how you're going to experience it. I think you'll play it with me that way.
I'm looking very forward to it.
I haven't heard in our conversations off camera, and this is why I'm bringing up this point, I haven't heard in our conversations off camera that you have an inclination towards the mixing that I do. I want to smash my game together and see what happens. And every time I bring it up, you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, I'll join you for a game. But never once have I heard you go, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that myself. Maybe my copy will also bridge that gap. And this could reflect our preference, the chaos, the craze, the score, whatever happens type of experience versus the chess match, the known puzzle that's been solved, that's there, that you can engage with fully, and you know what's in front of you.
I would agree with that. I also will say that I don't feel like much of a game designer. I'm not entirely sure how I would best be able to kind of merge them together without kind of ruining the experience. And that to me is my big worry. Is I love this game so much. I feel like I don't get it to the table enough. And so when I am going to play it, I want to make sure I can guarantee myself to have the best experience possible.
So what does that look like? We'll end on that note. I've told people what I think my end crazed result might be.
Which I'm interested in playing.
And just to be clear, I might ruin the experience. And I would have fun having experienced a broken version of the game. And then I'll reset it back if I did. Yeah. Or I might discover something really cool and really weird and really wacky that I don't get to the table often, but is super fun and unique when I do. For you, if you could pick and choose and set up and you were going to host game night and everyone defaulted to your preference, what does Dune look like at this point with all the expansions, with all the modules? What do you have on the table?
So I definitely have the base board.
Okay.
I'm definitely playing with Rise of X, as previously mentioned.
Yeah. Sounds like that's standard. Sounds like that doesn't go anywhere.
Absolutely standard. I think most of the time I will play with Immortality.
Okay.
Because I like that, especially thematically. Having the Twi'leks, the Twi'leks faction being on there is fun. I might play with having the sandworms. Trying to figure out a way to get that mechanic kind of in there, just again for thematic reasons, because sandworms are such a prevalent thing in the Dune books, But other than that, I mean, maybe bring in the conflict cards that have the matching, possibly. But yeah, no, it's going to lean heavily more towards kind of those base game elements.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like the game that you discovered, that you fell in love with, has things that could improve it or tweak it, but not a lot has beaten it. Not a lot has challenged it. And that's what you were concerned about the expansions doing in the first place. And the fact that, Rise of X just solidified your love of it is neat. I like that. I also like the advice, because I think your opinion is a more reliable one on what someone should do if they're buying base game. Because I don't encourage them, I encourage them to buy Uprising unless they're teaching or they're a new gaming group. And then my advice was, buy base game. But if you're a more advanced gaming group that wants a more strategic, more controlled puzzle, or a more thematic, like to the lore puzzle, if you love Dune, then I think your advice of, buy base game with Rise of X, period, is probably good.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you enjoy these conversations. And let us know when you're showing up for game night. We've got a big helter-skelter version of this game we need to get to the table. And I think I hate the 5 and 6 player variants of this game. I think I do. I think I hate it. I'm not sure, because as far as I can tell, it's impossible to facilitate and play. So if anyone, whether it's a publisher, a friend that lives close or far away to Cleveland, Ohio, and 5 more of his friends, because I don't think Corey's joining, he's also very conflicted. If anyone wants to show up and prove me wrong that 5 and 6 player version of this game, I have no idea what Direwolf did. You want to prove me wrong on that? Please do. We'll record it. I'll talk about it. I'll apologize on camera. Whatever you want. I think it's horrible. I think they should not sell the game with 5 and 6 listed on the box. I think it's a scam.
Ouch.
Yeah, I think it's terrible. I think it's unplayable.
Jeez, Jesse, tell us how you feel.
I feel that way. Yeah. I feel that way. And I have tried to play it, and I have tried to read the rules, and I have a friend who did play it with a designer at a convention, and it took that friend 7 hours with a designer, with one of the people that made...
That's too long.
And it was a hour plus long teach for a game they all already knew. It's like, I don't know what they did. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong on that.
It's okay. You're in a safe space here.
On BGG also, I don't think I see anyone mentioning 5 or 6.
I don't know.
Like in forums, in chat groups, I don't know I've ever seen anyone bring it up like it's something that's being played.
I don't know. Maybe that's for another time.
Thank you for being here. Whatever the case, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Don't get 5 and 6 player games. You don't have that many friends anyway. Stick with 2.
Ouch.
We'll see you later. Bye.